Paying off your mortgage or investing the money, that is the really question that we need to answer. Now, paying off the mortgage might be a smart financial move. You'll have more cash flow on a month to month basis. And of course, you're going to save money on interest. But making extra mortgage payments and paying it off early isn't for everyone. Might be better off paying off your debt. And in this video, I want to break down mathematically looking at my scenario with my numbers. Does it make sense to invest the money, or does it make sense to go ahead and really pay down and put extra principal payments on the mortgage and pay it off in the entirety? So what are some of the benefits for paying off this mortgage? Big one, of course, saving thousands or tens of thousands of dollars in interest. As we're making our mortgage payments, we know a portion of it does go to interest, while the other portion goes to principal. That makes up your payment in its entirety. For example, if you took out a $400,000 mortgage at 30 years at 6%, paying it off in just 10 years would save you $241,000 in interest, so over 50% of the value. Now, in addition to that, it also provides financial security. Once you own the home outright, that's right, no one can foreclose on it. There's not a chance losing the house unless you're not paying your taxes. And of course, you're not on the hook for those big, expensive mortgage payments. For a majority of people, it is the biggest expense and it is the biggest payment that we'll ever make when it comes to the mortgage. Now, of course, you can build this into a very hefty nest egg. You can really put your money aside and use it in different purposes, giving you flexibility for other goals within your life. If you're looking at retiring early, if you're looking at college plans for your kids, your grandkids, whatever it is, the average monthly current mortgage payment is $2,883 on a 30-year fixed mortgage, which is crazy to think. It is almost $3,000 a month that people are paying for mortgages. Now, that is according to the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the National Association of Realtors. So freeing up that money could really make a big difference. Now, what are some of the big drawbacks? That's what we're going to be looking at in today as well, because when you think of the drawbacks, lost investment opportunities. When you're putting extra money towards the mortgage, that is money you do not have the ability to put into an investment account. Now, of course, the average mortgage rate today is around 7%, while the average stock market return over the last 10 years is 12%. So you could essentially invest the money, keep that 5% between the difference. And of course, that is the difference when you look at going into a mortgage versus going into the stock market. And of course, you have reduced liquidity. Now, when it comes to putting money into the stock market, you still have access to those brokerage accounts. When you're putting money onto the principal of your mortgage, it's not as easy to access the funds that are on there. You might have to go through a remortgage process, or you might have to go through a home equity process, which again really defeats the entire purpose of focusing on and paying off the mortgage early. And of course, you have to make sure the first one, of course, that you have your emergency fund, that it's fully funded, that everything is in place before you start putting more money towards the mortgage. When we think of Dave Ramsey and his baby steps, looking at baby steps 1 through 7, paying off the mortgage is number 6, which means it is really the last one, meaning you don't have any more debt. Auto loans are paid off, student loans are paid off, all of your credit card debt, all of your debt in the entirety is paid off before you get to the point of putting extra money on your mortgage. Now, of course, there are a couple strategies for this. You could make extra principal payments. You could do biweekly payments. You could even refinance to a shorter term, which is exactly what we did. But let's go ahead and get into the numbers and show you exactly what it means to put the money in a investment account versus putting it into my extra payments on the mortgage. So let's go ahead and break this down. All right, guys, so here we are on investor.gov. Now, this, of course, is the compound interest calculator. If you're unfamiliar with it, it is super impressive and super important to do this on a regular basis, knowing exactly where your investments are going to go. So looking at cash flow, looking at my balance sheet of what my income looks like, the liabilities, we have set aside $1,000 a month to put towards the mortgage. So that shows our monthly contribution rate here is going to be $1,000. Now, over this length of time, as it sits right now, we are looking at a 30-year mortgage, which is where we're at. But of course, the length of time that we're going to invest this is going to determine and is going to change depending on how long we're going to put that extra money towards it. Because remember, if we're putting it to the mortgage or if we're putting it to the investment account, we have to see exactly how fast we're going to pay off that mortgage. Now, the also assumption interest rate is 10%. When we think about the S&P 500, that is where I have a majority of my funds. Knowing that the interest rate is at 10%, again, we're using a little bit of the lower end. Over the past 10 years, it's been around 12%, but I would rather go a little bit lower on here. Now, the big thing is when it comes to the mortgage, and this is where, for me, the big difference comes into when we start looking at a mortgage calculation and we start breaking this down mathematically. So home price 150K, that is exactly what we owe. We did this on a 30-year, and the big thing here is the interest rate. As you can see, the original loan structure is 2.5%. Now, when we start looking at the compound interest calculator at 10% average return of the S&P 500 versus the 2.5% that we're paying on the mortgage, this again is where the big difference comes in, because looking at the balance even here, additional monthly loan payment is going to be our $1,000 that we're putting on here. And I'm going to show you the scheduled table of when we're going to pay this off with these additional payments. So looking right here, kind of crazy when you start looking at mortgage calculators, because you can see right here, total monthly payments, $213,000, additional payments, $167,000, but interest saved, $46,000, guys, right there. 46K was saved in interest alone. Now think about this, on a $150,000 balance, I saved $46,000 by making additional payments. That is kind of crazy to think. And also looking at the time saved. So the length, remember, was in 30 years. Making the additional payments paid this off in 8 years, 9 months. So we are looking at a 9-year time frame when this mortgage is going to be completely done. Time saved 21 years. So not only did I save 21 years of making a mortgage payment, but I also cut the mortgage down to 9 years in total, meaning it is going to be under a 10-year mortgage. So going from a 30 to a 9-year mortgage because of the interest payments that we are making in its entirety. So utilizing this 9 years, this is where, again, it kind of gets interesting. So length and time right here is the 9 years that we were talking about. So we know putting an extra $1,000 towards the mortgage payment is going to cut us down to 9 years. So in that same length of time, in those same 9 years, when we do our calculation down here, in 9 years, you will have $162,000. That's right. Kind of crazy to think again that when you look at that same 9-year time frame, we are looking $162,000 that we are going to earn in this investment account. $1,000 a month over the 9-year period, 10% return that is compounding annually, $162K compared to $46,000 if we put in the mortgage. So again, mathematically, it does make sense to go ahead, put the extra money in an investment account, and also looking at where we're going to kind of break even when you look at the balance. So if you think even just paying this off, and this is another way that I kind of did this, is looking at it. So let's say we're not putting anything into this mortgage. So let's say calculate, there we go. We have our regular amortization schedule, not putting anything in here. You can see 30 years, 30 years. This is just straight up exactly what we're going to be paying for the home over the 30-year period. Now, of course, at 9 years, we're at $162K. When we start going down this amortization schedule, and essentially it took us 9 years to get there. So let's see where the mortgage is in those 9 years. Right here, we are at 9 years. We owe $116,000 on the house. We are 9 years into the mortgage. We've been making all of our regular payments like we did. 9 years in, our balance is $116K. Looking at what we made, $162K. So even if we backtracked a little bit for where we were going to $162K. So let's move up here a little bit to where we're at after 9 years. And again, thinking, oh, that's right. We only borrowed $150K. So in 9 years, and again, kind of thinking where we're at $150K, even if we went down to, let's say 8 years here, calculated this, 137. So in 8 years, we could have this paid off instead of going in here and putting the extra money towards the mortgage. And again, because of this, this is the reason why I have put a lot more money into the investment account, because we're looking at 8 years, 9 months, almost 9 years right here in totality, where in 8 years we have 137. So honestly, we're looking pretty similar to where we are, even though this does yield a considerable higher return. If we're looking at that exact same time frame, the 8.9 months, you have to think that we're paying off almost the debt in the same time that we are the compounding interest calculator, and how much money we're making in the same time frame. So for me, I'm putting money right now into the stock market itself. And when I'm getting to a certain point is there is going to be a point where my stock market balance, and it is going to be my 50th birthday. That is what we're planning right now, is when I hit that milestone, I'm going to pull what I need to out of the stock market over a multitude of years, and we're going to pay off the balance in the entirety, which means I have roughly 5 years left on this mortgage that I can pay down. But when we start looking again at these extra principal payments And you can see, even breaking it down here on our first payment, 312 goes towards the interest, 280 to the principal. So even at a very, very low 2.5% interest rate, there is still more money going to the interest. And as you can see, as we go down a couple years, there is kind of a break even point, which is probably right about here, 296, 296. So you're talking 2 years. What's that? 4 months into your mortgage before your principal balance that you're paying down is actually going to surpass the interest. Now, again, the interesting with this, the thing that's super interesting is when you get into the higher balances. And for instance, right now, thinking around homes in this area around 400,000, average rate right now is 7%. When you start looking at this, again, it's insane when the rates get high, because you can see first payment, 2,300 interest, you have 327 going to principal. Now remember, at a lower rate, we were about 2 years, 4 months in before we actually broke down or broke even, looking at 7%. And again, this is kind of eye-opening. I mean, right now you can see the balances are coming down, the interest is coming down, and right about there, there's 1337, 1334. So right about here, 20 years, you are looking at 20 years before you hit that even point between what you're paying in principal, what you're paying in interest. And then when you start getting, you are 20 years in at this point. But when you start getting, remember, we're getting a $400,000 house. So you go down all of this way, you're paying, look at that. There's your last payment. Boom. You paid $558,000 in interest on top of the $400,000 you paid in principal. So doing rough math, that's $958,000 that you paid for your $400,000 house because of the interest that you paid over 30 years. It's crazy. It's crazy when you think about today and what kind of the younger generation and people are faced with if they're looking at the housing market at a 7% at a $400,000 house. Not only is the payment $3,000 a month, but again, looking here, you are paying for your house well over double the price that you're originally paying on that $400,000 principal. It is kind of crazy to think that that is where we're at. So honestly, does it make sense to pay off the mortgage faster? Does it make sense to invest the money? Let me know in the comments what you guys think about this great debate. Most people have said investing the money and looking at my financial advisors, the financial counseling aspect, putting money into the market, even looking at the last couple of years where we've seen double-digit returns, is going to far surpass the 2.5% that I'm paying on the current mortgage that we have. But of course, there is something to be said about not the mathematical side about it, but the psychological side of having a house that is completely free and clear, having the ability to use those funds for different places. And of course, like Dave Ramsey says, when you go and step into your yard, take off your shoes, step in the grass of a house that is completely paid for, it is really the financial well-being of having that, knowing it's yours, knowing that you don't have a mortgage on it. It is completely free and clear. All right, guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching.